Hi everyone, my name is Katie Brown. I am doing our assignment on dispositional learning for our class. My first thing that I wanted to talk about was special educators' roles in supporting learning, improving, planning, practice, and then upholding professional expectations. My biggest thing that I want to talk about is modifications. There's a huge amount of things that special educators do, but the biggest thing that I think is important as an outsider perspective that's not currently a special educator is modifications. Each of our single kids knows that they learn differently, and they have to have those modifications to be able to help them learn the same things that our other students are learning in the general education classroom. So when we make those modifications, we are supporting their learning, and we are also improving their learning all at the same time by making those modifications. And by planning what a teacher can do to help make those modifications for the general education classroom, we as special educators are working side by side with them and helping with that. And on top of that, the practice itself is we are creating an environment that students are able to learn in because of those modifications. Ethically speaking, I would say that the biggest thing that special educators, professionally and ethically speaking, are required to do are making those IEPs, right? It's a huge, huge thing that students absolutely must have because it is a legally binding document that teachers must adhere to and that students absolutely need, and the government needs to see that, we are helping these students that are struggling. When we have all those modifications, when we have all those IEPs set in place, we can go, keeping confidentiality, of course, and which is also an ethical obligation. And we can talk to other special education professionals and talk to them and say, hey, this is what I do. What do you do? And that is how we collaboratively increase or advance the field of special education. And on the flip side, in general education teachers, we have to adhere to those mods. I was a general education teacher and I had to adhere to modifications that special education teachers put in place. So by supporting learning and planning and improving our lessons as general education teachers, we can create an environment that's inclusive by adhering to those modifications. And the practice of it is that when we create an environment that that's modified so that our special education students learn and our general education students learn, everybody's happy and everybody's learning. And although it might be difficult for some general education teachers, it's something that they have to adhere to per the law. Ethically, it's their responsibility, and professionally, it's their responsibility to make sure we have those high expectations and make sure we have those modifications put in place for those students. And then when we all get to, special education teachers and general education teachers, when they come together, they create a classroom that is inclusive for all. In fact, in Canada, and I'll cite this, after the fact, but in Canada, they are doing a classroom that has the special education teacher and the general education teacher in the classroom at the same time with all the kids all day long. So the classroom is the definition of inclusive, and that is something that is incredibly important and something that I think we should maybe try to move towards. Although right now I think the biggest issue with that is actually being staffed enough to do that, and that is a whole other cup of tea. Currently, my dispositions are, I would say that I'm a very kind person. I have very high expectations. I have a very bubbly personality, and I'm very patient with my students. I think that something that I need to work on is the way that I speak and my impulsivity. I have ADHD, and it's not something that hinders me, I would say. It can help me, but it can also hinder me. By hindering me, it is, sometimes I say a sentence, say a string of words that doesn't make any sense. And I think that I recognize that after I say it, but my brain doesn't quite compute. So I think that's something that I am working on, thinking before I speak, making sure I have my whole sentence together. Okay. Finally, the effects of personal bias on students and that we have on students. I think that the most important thing to remember is that every single person has personal bias. As much as we don't want to admit it, we do. My school that I currently teach at, I have EL learners, I have students that are Native American, I have students with disabilities, and I have students that are generally considered, I would say like poor, because the school that I'm at is a Title I school. And the Title I school means that we get more funding from the government to help students that might struggle a little more because they don't necessarily have all of the accessibility that another school like that would. I think that if you as a teacher know what your personal bias is, we need to put it aside. There are students that come in every day into classes that I know that are stoned. There are students that come into classes that I teach in every day that are wearing a sweatshirt and holes in their clothes, and they don't have a jacket, and it's the middle of January. I have seen so many different things that could create a bias, and I think the most important thing is that we say, okay, I see my bias, I can understand that this is here. However, you have to, as teachers, uphold the highest expectations for every single student, because it doesn't matter their background. It doesn't matter if they don't speak English, they don't, it doesn't matter, because now I will say that they might have to work harder. Some of those kids have to work a lot harder to get to where they are, but you still have those expectations for them. You can do it every single day. You tell those kids that you can do it. And I think that when we have biases, we are judging, and that is very not Christian. And when we judge families because of, the money that they have, the language they speak, the things that they do with their time, the only thing that I would say that is important is if you see something that's worth mandated reporting, that is what we have to accomplish. That is what we have to think about. And that's something that you can put aside. That's not a bias. That is this child is in danger. But I will say that every student should come into your class with the same expectations. But biases really do truly affect the way that your community views you. It affects the way that your students view you. Kids can tell. Kids know. Kids know when people are treated differently because of this, that, or the other thing. They know, and they can tell. And I think it's really important that we understand that everybody has biases, but it's about how you act upon those biases that are important. If you do act upon those biases, your students won't like you. I will quote from a TED Talk: kids don't learn from teachers they don't like. So if you have a bias against a student and it is showing, it will affect your relationship with the student. It will affect your relationship with the community, because people talk. And it will also affect anything you do in your classroom from that point on, because that student knows they're being treated differently. Other students see that you're treating that student differently. The families see it. Everybody sees it. So I think the most important thing is to recognize we have biases, move past them, and continue to teach like you would teach. And high expectations per the dispositional values sheet is very, very important. And that's all I got for you.